Hi, I'm Stephanie and this is Mike. So for the purpose of this term project, we decided to tackle cybersecurity in the context of game theory. So in the past 2 years, cybersecurity has become a very relevant topic as most corporations and individuals' information and data can be found or stolen from internet-connected systems. So as more sophisticated ways to store data online facilitates corporations' operations and individuals' personal activities, various types of attacks are also being developed in order to steal, destroy, leak, or alter data and systems from those networks. So attacks on the network might cause temporarily unavailability to the system, reduce the user's bandwidth, or access to the system. So understanding and developing efficient cybersecurity technique to protect our networks will always be important as attackers will continue to find new ways to hack information systems, so defenders must continue to find new ways to protect them. So most of the time, attackers have the advantage of time over defenders. They have the ability to pretend to be a user, gather more information on the system itself before deciding how or when to try to compromise it. So we'll be using a signaling model and perfect vision equilibrium concept to model this game and offer a fair game to the defender. Different techniques have been approached in order to model cybersecurity and aim to offer the most secure network to its users. We investigated how deception technique can be used to protect the network against all attackers with as less cost as possible. So we modeled cost as being mostly time and money in our case. The deception technique has been used in the military before and can be seen as being a camouflage technique in this case. It's used in order to increase the effectiveness of the protector's network defense system. So this deception increases the attacker's uncertainty and the cost of its attacks. Honeypots are a form of deception techniques. It is a computer system that detects unauthorized accesses. But since it's a trap, no one should be accessing them. As such, every access to a honeypot is considered as an attack. So if they were to be attacked, honeypots are defined to produce an important source of information detailing every single attack against it. And that is precisely why attackers tend to avoid them at all costs. However, attackers may be able to identify honeypots since they have a considerable input-output delays, unusual system calls, tempting obvious file names such as password, and additional data in memory. So this technique's efficiency is significantly improved when a defender camouflages her system. It makes her honeypot look as if they're a normal system and make her normal system look as if they're honeypot. So if we look at the system model, we see that the player nature, denoted by C in our diagram, chooses between the honeypot system denoted by H with probably pH and a normal system denoted by N with probably 1 minus pH randomly. So the defender plays, then based on the received signal from the defender, the attacker will play its move. The attacker can receive two signals, either H if the defender decides to make her system look as if it's a honeypot, or N if she decides to make her system look as if it's a normal system. So the signal emitted by the defender is independent of the system's real type. So the attacker has three options, each with different payoffs. She can either determine the system, she can either attack the system without determining its type, A, so attack it. She can either test the system before attacking it, so T, or she can simply withdraw, W. So if the attacker decides to determine the system type before attacking, it is still assumed that after determining that a system is a normal type, it will be attacked before the defender has time to play its next move. So if we look at the left-hand side part of the game, where the actual type of the game is H, if the attacker decides to attack the honeypot, well, of course, believing that the system is normal, the payoff for the defender will be V0. The benefit of observing an attack on a honeypot where VO, so it's greater than 0, and the payoff of a defender would be minus CA minus CO, which is the cost of attacking the system minus the cost of an attack on a honeypot being observed. So if the attacker decides to determine the system's type before attacking, the payoff of the defender is 0, as the attacker will have determined the system is truly a honeypot and not a normal one. So the payoff of the attacker will be minus CN or minus CH, the cost of testing if it's a system is normal or if it's a honeypot. So, and lastly, for W, the outcome of not attacking the network when the system is a honeypot is that both players have a payoff of 0. If we look at the right-hand side of the figure now, the actual type of the system is normal. So if the attacker decides to attack network A, the defender has the payoff of minus CC, which is the cost associated with a compromised system, and the attacker obtains the payoff of VA minus CA, where VA is the benefit of attacking a system and CA, so minus the cost of attacking the system. So if the attacker solely attacks the network after testing its type T, then the outcome for defender is still the same. It's still minus CC because since the system will still be compromised, as the attacker will determine that the system is normal after testing it, so it will attack it. The payoff of the attacker will then be similar for the payoff of an attack system, but minus the cost of testing it. Lastly, if the attacker decides not to attack normal system at all, then she believes that it is a honeypot. So the payoff of player one is VG, which is the benefit of an avoided attack on a normal system, and the payoff of the attacker is 0. So in order to make this system model more complete, we came out with a modified system model, which adds a cost of camouflage, the utility of the defender for normal system types and honeypots, where the defender signals them as honeypots and normal systems, respectively. And also the benefit of an avoided attack, VG on normal system, is considered to be 0 in our case, and we believe that this allows the model to model real-life situations more accurately. We will solve this game using perfect Bayesian equilibria. We'll first look at two pure strategies. So first separating and then pooling equilibria. So in order to consider the existence of a separating equilibria, we first look at the possible equilibrium involving S2. So by definition, S2, we can see it from here, that whenever there's a normal system, the defender will signal it as being normal, and whenever she has a honeypot, she will signal the system as being a honeypot as well. So now looking at what player 2 will play, we need to look at her payoffs. So if we look at up here, either she gets a payoff minus CA minus CO, minus CN, or 0. So obviously she'll choose a payoff of 0 because it's the greatest payoff she can get. If we're looking at bottom here, when she gets signal N, either she gets VA minus CA, VA minus CA minus CH, or 0. And of course, VA minus CA is the greatest payoff, so she'll choose A. That strategy here is that whenever she gets signal N, she replies with A, and whenever she gets signal H, she replies with W, and that corresponds to strategy T3. To strategy T3, what will the defender answer? So now let's find out. Whenever she gets signal N, we establish that the attacker will always play A. So looking at the payoffs here, either player 1 gets a 0 or V0 minus camouflage. So V0 minus camouflage is obviously greater than 0, so she will deviate. Doing the same thing on the other side, we know that whenever she gets a signal H, the attacker will play W. So either player 1 gets minus camouflage or minus CC, the cost of being compromised. But the camouflage is obviously smaller than CC, so she will deviate again, and that strategy corresponds to S3, because whenever she has a normal system, she will signal H, and whenever she gets a honeypot, she will signal it as being N. If we were to do the same experience on S3, we would find out that playing S3, the attacker will respond with T7, and then the defender will respond again, but with S2 in this case. So we can see here that this game does not have any separating equilibria, since neither S2 nor S3 results in steady state.
Because of the time constraint on this presentation, we're only going to present the calculation of the equilibrium from the strategies of S1 for the defender and T1, T2, T3 for the attackers. Let's first take a look at when the attacker chooses T1 as his strategy. So in T1, no matter what signal that the attacker receives, it will always return as attack. In this case, when the defender is of type H, and she is choosing to send signal N to the attacker, she will receive a payoff of VO minus its camouflage. When she changed mind and sending H to the attacker, she will receive a payoff of V0. And VO is actually greater than VO minus its camouflage, so this branch is unstable. Therefore, we can eliminate T1. Let's take a look at T2. In T2, the attacker switches strategy. She will respond as T when she receives a signal of H. And if the defender is of type H, and she's sending signal H to the attacker, in this case, she will receive a payoff of 0. And 0 is less than VO minus the camouflage. So this branch is stable. Let's take a look at when definer is in of type N. In this case, when she sends a signal of N to the attacker, she'll receive A minus CC as her payoff. If she chooses to send H to the attacker instead, she will receive A minus CC minus camouflage as her payoff. And minus CC minus camouflage is actually less than minus CC. So this branch is also stable. So in this case, T2 is a valid candidate for the equilibrium to happen. Let's take a look at T3. So in T3, the attacker switches strategy again. She will return a W when she receives a H. In this case, when the definer is of type N and she's sending the signal as H to the attacker, she will receive a minus camouflage as her payoff. And minus camouflage is actually greater than minus CC. Therefore, this branch is not stable. We can get rid of T3. And you can do the same thing for T4, T5, all the way to T9. And you'll find that only T2 in this case will be a potential candidate for the equilibrium to happen. From the previous slides, we know that only when the attacker chooses T2 as her strategy, when the definer is choosing S1, can yield a potential perfect basic equilibrium. Now we need to find out the constraints on the probability of the nature and the probability of the prior beliefs on the attackers. So first thing first, what we need to consider is that when the definer is actually playing on the equilibrium path, where she's shooting N to the attackers, and the attacker responds as attack, we need to show that the attack on the attacker can maximize the attacker's utility. And this is precisely what those equations are doing on this point. And it will yield a constraint on the probability of natures. And secondly, what we need to consider is when the definer is playing off equilibrium path strategies, where she is spontaneously sending H to the attackers, and the attacker is responding with NT. We need to show that T can also maximize the attacker's utility. And this is precisely what those equations are doing here. As you can see, that it will yield with an constraint on the prior beliefs on the attackers, which is Q. And similar process can be done when the definer is choosing S4 as her strategy. And you will hold this similar result as shown in this chart. So let's compare the polling results to the original paper. As you can see here, in the original paper, it actually proposed 10 different equilibriums from polling strategies, but we're only having 2. And it is actually very interesting takeaways. It's that even with a small increment on the camouflage cost, the choices of the equilibrium for the system can shrink substantially. In this case, we're shrinking from 10 to 2. But this is actually what we expected. As we're adding a camouflage cost to generalize the model, we're actually putting a constraint into the system at the same time. So in this case, when the camouflage is greater than 0, it will interrupt a lot of the equal original payoffs and discarding them from being a potential equilibrium. One of the advantages is that the definer now will have a clearer view of how the attacker will behave if her system, of course, satisfying the constraints. Because each of her choices, either she's choosing S1 or S4, there will be only one equilibrium waiting for her. And the second and the third takeaway from this result is actually about how to manipulate the honeypot deployments. If we take a closer look at the constraints on the probability of the honeypots, we'll have something very interesting to find. Let's take a look at this inequality first. Basically, what they're saying is that the probability of the honeypot should be less than or equal to the cost of testing a honeypot for the attackers over the cost of an attack plus the cost of the attack being observed for the attackers. So the denominators basically forms the majority cost of the attackers. If the cost of the attacker to perform an attack is already high, then we just don't need to deploy that much honeypot into the system because the attackers simply don't have enough budget to reach them all. Let's take a look at these constraints, for instance. Basically, what it's saying is that pH should be greater or equal to the profit gained from an attack minus the cost of detecting a normal system over the profit gained from an attack. The profit gained from an attack is basically just the benefit the attacker received from an attack minus the cost of an attack. So if the attacker is super efficient, which means the cost for him or her to detect a normal system is really low, then you should deploy more honeypots into the system just to bring up the cost of the attackers.